Speakers, the Honourable Trevor Khan.
Madam Deputy President, I should start by noting that this is the first opportunity I've had to serve on a committee, and have found the cooperation shown by the other members of the committee and the courtesy that has been shown to each other, including myself, to be quite extraordinary. No doubt it in part flowed from the calm and thoughtful chairmanship of the committee by the Honourable Ian West, who, even when confronted with the most amazing of opportunities to calm a member down, seemed to be capable of dealing with it in a most appropriate and thoughtful way. So I certainly thank him specifically for the way in which he cooperated. He dealt with matters before the committee. Madam Deputy President, could I start my contribution by noting that there were a number of moving and passionate contributions to the committee. The issue of Indigenous disadvantage rightly raises high emotion and indeed differing perspectives on the way forward within the Aboriginal community. Those differences should be acknowledged, but not seen as a point of criticism, because there is no truly right or wrong way to deal with many of these issues. In truth, there is no silver bullet, no one answer that will provide a panacea for all past ills and injustices that have been inflicted on the Aboriginal community. But what there must be is a recognition and acknowledgement by us all, both Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal, that a society that seeks to paint itself as just and compassionate cannot allow the continuing gap in outcomes between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal members of the community. Madam Deputy President, it would be fair to say that the interim report is presented with the unanimous support of all its members. The committee worked cooperatively and indeed in a spirit of genuine concern for the evident problems within the Aboriginal community. That said, there is no doubt that there is a difference in emphasis felt by various members as to the way forward, and just as one could rightly respect the differing views within the Aboriginal community, one should also acknowledge that the differing emphases of the committee members does not reflect any greater or less compassion, but rather simply a differing view as the way to close the gap. I would, however, observe at this point that for me perhaps the most moving part of this inquiry was my attendance in the theatrette of this parliament for the delivery by the Prime Minister Kevin Rudd of the apology. There can be little doubt that from my view, on going into the theatrette, that what I was to witness was a piece of mere symbolism that would of itself achieve no possible good. I was of the view that such symbolism as this would do nothing to close the gap and would instead simply pander to what I could loosely describe as the basket weavers of Balmain. Madam Deputy President, I was wrong, and I am happy to admit that fact. As the speech was delivered, one could hear those present sob. There was a palpable air of distress in the theatrette. There was nothing made up. There was nothing one could describe other than the obvious relief that finally the Prime Minister, and therefore the Australian government, was prepared to admit that people had been wronged. That families had been torn asunder, that people had been denied their rights and privileges under Australian law. And, Madam Deputy President, let there be no doubt, children were torn from the breasts of their mothers, and for no reason other than the colour of their skin. Madam Deputy President, I too am sorry, not just for the wrong done to so many people, but also for my inability to understand the depth of the feeling felt by those people. Madam Deputy President, I must move on and deal with the other matters and note that we all share a responsibility for closing the gap. We must all recognise that we have dealt with these problems very badly in the past and indeed have been unwilling to admit our shortcomings in dealing with the very significant disadvantages that the Aboriginal community has faced. Equally, we have not been prepared to acknowledge the injustices and prejudices that the Aboriginal community have endured since colonisation began in 1788. What the report demonstrates is that there are significant gaps, not just in life expectancy, but also in a number of the other indicators of social well-being. Specifically in that regard, it's worth noting and placing on the record the following. Life expectancy at birth for males in the Indigenous community is 60 years. In the non-Indigenous community, it is 76.4 years. Life expectancy at birth for females in the Indigenous community is 65.1 years. In the non-Indigenous community, it is 82.3. The median age in the Indigenous community is 20 years. In the non-Indigenous community, it is 37. Year 10 educational attainment in the Indigenous community is 32%. In the non-Indigenous, it's 25.2. Year 12 attainment in the Indigenous community is a mere 22.2%, as compared to 47.4% amongst the non-Indigenous community. Individual income amongst the Indigenous community is $278, compared to $466 amongst the non-Indigenous community. Madam Deputy President, I have referred earlier to a difference in emphasis amongst the members of the committee, and it can be no doubt that it is my concern that the figures that I have referred to above indicate there are key significant shortcomings that must be addressed, and which any government must be measured against if one is to consider whether that government has delivered a just and compassionate society. If I put it another way, the figures that I have referred to form the basis for producing key performance indicators of success or failure. In truth, it is my view that what is most important is achieving success in improving the outcomes by reference to the key performance indicators. I, in truth, have less interest in the processes that achieve that end. And Madam Deputy President, I know that is not a view that is entirely shared by my fellow committee members, and I accept, as I have been wrong in the past, no doubt I will be wrong in the future. But nevertheless, I must say that if we cannot achieve outcomes that can be measured, then we are failing the community. We must achieve it. If I put it another way, it is my view that we should not allow ourselves to lose sight of the fact that whether it upsets people or not, we have an obligation as human beings living in a civilised society to ensure that all people have a fair go, that no one suffers from the results of alcoholism, that women are not assaulted by their partners or other members of their family, that children are not neglected, that they have a bed to sleep in, and that they are fed and cared for and loved, that children are not sexually assaulted, whether it be by family members or siblings or strangers, and that children go to school and find the experience sufficiently rewarding that they will then stay at school and complete Year 12. Madam Deputy President, that is the message that I wish to deliver. It is for the community generally and for the government specifically to design and to develop programs which ensure that members of the Aboriginal community end up reaching the same outcomes in terms of living standards, in terms of health, in terms of education and in terms of life expectancy as the community as a whole. Madam Deputy President, I believe that the report that has been prepared, the interim report that has been prepared by this committee, is a significant step in the right direction. I encourage all members of this House, indeed all members of this Parliament and members of our community, to read it carefully and consider the tragedy that it portrays. Thank you, Madam Deputy President.